Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce you today to Eli Gescheit. With over 15 years of experience in the field of residential and commercial projects, Eli has an impressive track record of success in navigating the complex world of Sydney council planning processes. His unique background, having worked in both planning consultancies and local councils, has given him an unrivaled understanding of the internal workings of councils and the needs and requirements of clients. Eli's wealth of knowledge and expertise has helped countless individuals and businesses achieve their goals in the ever-evolving landscape of city planning. It's an honor to have him join us on the show today, and I can't wait to jump in, learn some valuable insights and perspectives. So, without further ado, let's dive into the conversation. Eli, thank you to the show today.
Thank you for inviting me. Really appreciate it. I love watching your posts and videos also on LinkedIn.
Thank you. Yeah, we follow each other. We've been following each other for a long while. One of the things that I've noticed is you are very busy. You've got a lot going on across Sydney. And I wanted to have this show today because there are a lot of things that I see in the data. There's a lot of things that I hear from developers, private developers and institutional developers. But I wanted to get the firsthand information from the people that are on the ground. And I noticed that you've worked behind the scenes, both for councils, but then also on the front line with developers and home buyers and homeowners. So I guess without any further ado, I mean, what are you seeing out there? Is it getting harder to develop these days, get approvals?
Yeah, that's the big question, Dominic. Yeah, it's certainly not getting easier, I must admit. Things are getting much harder, and I don't think COVID made things any easier, particularly with the lockdowns, staff working from home, and really staff shortages that are still continuing till this day in local councils. So this space is evolving, and I'm adamant to be working with councils, as well as I'm looking towards interviewing two of them actually in my own webinars. To understand what they're doing right in terms of their internal processes, because often I find people are bashing councils, and in some respects, it's not professional to be bashing them because they're professionals just like you or me. So I'm trying to, I guess, change the narrative with councils, rather say we're on the same team here, and at the end of the day, that the clients is really homeowners, mum and dads, developers just trying to build a new home, or developers trying to fill in that gap with the housing shortage. So yeah, I'm trying to paint the narrative a bit differently, and really say to councils and people listening here, we're here to work with each other, to fix the problem.
It's a good way to be approaching things, because I feel like everyone treats the council as the bad guy. And I don't feel like that's a fair depiction, because no matter what they do, they're going to cop slack. If they process it too quickly, it means they've missed something, and then they're in favor of the developer and the local community hates them. If they process it too slowly, then the developers hate them because they're anti trying to get stock out of the ground. They're not commercial. So it feels like no matter what council does, they're never going to please everybody. And in some instances, they don't please anybody. And I guess that's the reason why I wanted to do this particular episode, is to get the council's perspective. What is it that you're experiencing that is slowing down this process? Is it just bureaucracy? Is it short staffing? Why are things where they are today, that things are so slow?
It's a combination of things, really. I can't only point it to one factor that's causing these issues within councils. But I would say, yeah, it's bureaucracy. It's to do with councils asking for a lot more information than they used to. Even 5 years ago, you were never requested to provide certain information. But I guess traditionally or naturally, what's happened with technology, particularly with plans, architectural plans, it's all electronic, as you know. Councils are asking for more information. The architects need to provide like more sets of drawings, particular dimensions, calculations. These things are particularly easy easier in a way to provide counsel because it's all electronic, it's technology that's allowing everybody to provide this information. But what it's doing, it's slowing down the process. More information, more costs for your clients to you submit more documentation or reports. So I don't think that in a way that's counsel's fault, because I've got one project that comes to mind with an architect based in Melbourne and a project here in Sydney. And this is his first project here in Sydney. And he's literally doing his head in saying, do we really need this for the DA? Like even stormwater plans. I said, yeah, you need all of this stuff up front. And he was like, well, in Melbourne, we do things very differently. So it's a bit of an educational exercise for both of us. But for me, this exercise with this architect in Melbourne, it tells me that councils do require a lot of extra information up front. And having worked in councils before, I kind of understand why. Some things might not be entirely necessary, to be honest, but most things, yeah, are required, mainly to give council the ability to assess an application properly. As you said before, like if they assess an application quickly, maybe they've missed something.
And what are you noticing are some of the harder councils to deal with, and which ones are the harder ones and why?
Listen, I don't want to name any councils out, which some people ask me to do, which is the worst council to deal with. I would say that they all have their own challenges. We've got projects in almost 30 councils at the moment around Sydney and also regional New South Wales. And there's not one council which I think is easier to work with than the other. They each have their pros and cons. But obviously each of them have their own nuances in terms of what, their processes and what to expect from them or what not to expect from them.
So if I were to try and submit an application to any council today, that'd all be basically the same. I know that you don't want to shit can any of them, but how about we go the other way? Which councils have you found that it's a simpler or more favorable process for the developer or homeowner, where there's a bit more conversation or it feels a bit more lenient or it kind of moves a little more swiftly?
Yeah, well, good question. Also depends on the type of development. It might be a home renovation to a terrace in Leichhardt, or it might be a block of apartments in Blacktown, possibly. But yeah, it also depends how, I guess, customer focused the council is too, which sometimes, more often than not, they lack. For example, returning phone calls, returning emails. So there's a real, I can't really pick one council, but there is one that comes to mind, Inner West Council, I would say, in terms of being proactive, encouraging pre-DA meetings, which, pre-DA meeting traditionally is for a development which is big, doesn't comply with a lot of things, and you're kind of testing the waters with council to have this type of meeting. And Inner West have actually embraced this and encouraged it a lot more, I think, than other councils, because they're there to work with you. So we've had multiple applications where we've taken even a renovation, like a small application that you wouldn't usually, particularly in like a conservation area, where there's a lot of subjective and greyness, I guess, in terms of what the final product, the house or whatever it is, should look like. So in those situations, Inner West, I'm finding helpful in that sense.
And is that a good process then? So regardless of whether or not you're doing a large scale development, if you are planning on doing adjustments to a home, but you're in an area that is a little prickly, where you've got maybe heritage, or you've got some kind of, greenery, you've got some kind of a protectionist council, you've got things that you need to be mindful of, that you should be doing these kind of pre-DA meetings, even for your own home, to streamline the process?
Oh, I would say so, for sure. It's number one, cost effective, because you don't have to submit the half a dozen documents that you would normally in a context of a DA. Plus, what happens is you actually eliminate at least one set of, or one round of amended plans. So you take your application to council, whether it's a renovation or block of apartments, and council, we usually go into these meetings telling our clients, we know what 95% of the issues are, right? And we have obviously want to have a conversation with council about that. Otherwise, we wouldn't really have a meeting with council if it's a fully compliant design, right? But there's always that 5% or so where council throws at us, hey, there's, it's under the flight path, or or something, or there's a change in council that's happening that's going to affect your property. So there's always those things that I guess you can kind of miss, which are easier to miss, where council actually helps you amending the plans or whatever to adjust it so that you've got a better chance of an approval. And councils are doing this anyway. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the planning portal. So for the last 3-4 years or so, you lodge your application online instead of going to your local council and submitting all the plans and reports in hard copy. So councils are already having this quality control process already, which I think it's useful and it's helpful to the applicants and developers. But also they're finding this as an opportunity. Councils are finding this as an opportunity to also do a mini review, saying, well, this doesn't comply. You have to make, you have to change it to comply. Some things we know don't comply already, but the councils are hesitant to let us submit it if it doesn't comply.
And is that a standard process for a lot of the new people that are out there? Not the planning portal, but submitting something that doesn't comply. I think many of us that have submitted plans, obviously you want to go in and have it 100% compliant, but is it in your, do you try and push the envelope? Is that in the best interest of the client to be submitting something that doesn't comply? And when would you want to be doing that? Putting something deliberately forward that doesn't comply with council?
Yeah, so it depends on the scale of the project and who the client is, and also the area. If it's an area where council has always approved something which complies 100%, if you're going in with a design that doesn't tick the box with everything, chances are you're doomed for failure. It's going to get refused. But if you obviously do your due diligence right with your obviously your town planner, architects, and your team, where you can say, well, actually, down the road, council approved this, a building which was over the height or the floor space, then you can say quite comfortably, well, why don't we have a crack at it also? We find, there's good reasons and we can support it, based on our professional opinion, and have a crack at it. So that's one way. Sometimes you might succeed, sometimes you don't.
Yeah. So basically, you're looking at evidence in the market where you can push the envelope, because a higher floor space means that your building's bigger, you've got more money, higher amount of revenue for your development site or your end price for your own home. Now, I guess this leads into my next question, and it is, with your breadth of knowledge and scope across all the councils, where have you seen small scale investors and small scale sort of owner builders make the most amount of money in those early stages of their property investment career with trying to do small scale developments? What have you seen as the most successful small scale developments, and where?
Well, the most common thing is really dual occupancies, where you can have one site, split it into two, have two properties there, or two houses there instead of one. I think that's the sweet spot for small time investors and first time developers. I've been involved with a few times talking at seminars for mums and dad developers, trying to get into the game, as well as investors like seasoned developers. I don't want to use the word easy, but it is an easier way to start off, I guess, because a lot of councils are encouraging this type of development, dual occupancies. And these days also, for the last, I would say, year or two, you can actually do them through a private certifier. So you can bypass council and get it approved as a compliant development, a dual occupancy. Obviously, the site has to be big enough and everything has to stack up all right. But I would say dual occupancies are quite a sweet spot, a great investment if you can obviously make it work for you financially. And it's, I have clients where they're not just doing one, they're doing multiple dual occupancies, within the span of a couple of years or within 1 year. because one of them is not going to, they're not going to, be a millionaire just doing one. You've got to do you've got to do a range of them. And I guess once you've got the right recipe, you've got the right team, and you know where to do it, it's pretty much straightforward.
So it sounds to me that this kind of investment strategy, it becomes a bit more of a career and a business. So it's not just I do it one and done and now I'm sorted. It is very much a process that you build on, and over time you can build it into a bit of a career, and it becomes a path forward. Not just I'll have a crack, do one, and then I'm finished, I'm sorted. The question that I was going to ask there is, you kind of had a bit of a smile there where you said it's not definitely easy, but it is the easier type. What are some of the difficulties that type of mum and dad investor or early developer or aspiring developer would get in trying to enter this type of game? And what have you seen? Where have you seen people make mistakes in that space?
Yeah, good question. So obviously the site has to be the right site. So apart from, the regular DAs that we do for clients, we also help clients find sites. It can take, might have to look for 10 sites before they're happy and that they can acquire their 10th site. So the site has to be big enough. Every councils have their own restrictions on how big the site needs to be. It could be 450 square meters or 600 square meters. You have to do your due diligence right to, number one, make sure that the site is big enough. Some councils also have a width requirement, so it might be 15 meters wide, the site, for a dual lock. So that's kind of step number one. Obviously, part of step number one, I would say, also is the zoning. It needs to be a permissible type of development in the zone. Most councils permit it, but there are some which over time have made it prohibited as a dual occupancy on a particular site. The other thing too, Dominic, is to look out for the site constraints. So things like, is the property heritage listed? Is there a tree in the middle of the property? Because maybe you can't knock it over for various reasons. Does the site slope to the rear, to the front? So as you might know, that the main issue is if the site slopes to the rear, then more often than not, council requires you to have an easement through the property, through the neighbour, through the property at the rear. So basically, if it rains, where does all the rainwater go? Traditionally, the rainwater just goes to the street. But if a site falls to the rear, it has to go through the neighbour's property. So acquiring an easement through the neighbour at the rear, that's obviously an expensive exercise. And often the neighbours will say no. But on some occasions, when the neighbours have said no, we go back to the council to say, well, we've got nowhere to discharge the stormwater. In those situations, the council will allow us to pump it to the street. And otherwise, it's a site which can never be developed, really, if you can never get the easement. So I would say heritage, tree, easement. Another, I guess, site constraint would obviously be bushfire. If the site's bushfire affected, depending on the level of bushfire, the rating, you can only have one house there, not two. So that would obviously restrict you from doing a dual occupancy or anything more. So there's a few things that, what we've sometimes done in the past is we prepare like cheat sheets for clients. Like they might be looking at a particular council area, so we can say, okay, here's the things to look for. Avoid these places because, never going to work, something like that.
See, this is really good information to the uninitiated, because everyone just thinks I'm just going to go and start splitting blocks up and developing. And it's not until you look at the nuance and the detail that you realize site selection is so important. That's obvious fact, but in going through that process, every one of those nuances comes with a new specialist. You've got your stormwater person, you've got your architect, you've got your town planner, you have, you might need an arborist, have a look at that. You might then need your fire guys. You might have any number of specialists that then need to come in, provide certification, give you some kind of insight to then say that this site will work or it won't work. And if it does work, then these are all the prohibitive costs to make it work. So I work with a lot of brand new investors, and I wanted this podcast as a way for them to understand that developing property can be done. It is, in my opinion, the most profitable way to use property as an investment, but it does come with the commensurate level of pain and risk. One of the other factors that I suppose with all that is each one of these consultants comes with a cost. So none of this is a free hit. It
Right.
comes with a huge initial upfront cash requirement, but then also a knowledge requirement, and then a huge amount of time. So it's the kind of industry that you don't just step into lightly unless it is going to become your career or your business.
Mhm.
Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you need a team that you can rely on to give you that level of advice. Obviously, the advice we give, is based on our experience, our knowledge, understanding, all of that. And sometimes it's wrong. Okay. I was talking to a bunch of buyers agents last week. They invited me to talk at one of their team meetings, and they asked that question: "What if you're wrong?" And like, the honest truth is, in most cases we get right. We know that easy things to look up are things like heritage. Is it heritage listed? But what I was telling them, and I'll tell your listeners too, one of the most common things which is not really picked up is flood affected. If the site is flood affected. Now, some councils do have flooding maps, but because of whatever it is, a lack of funds or whatever it is to develop these maps, these flooding maps, some councils don't have it. So you might buy a property and you do all your due diligence, and you find out later, well, actually it's flood affected. You might be able to build something there, but it has to be a certain height above the ground, or you may not actually be able to develop there at all. So yeah, but however, in most cases we do get things right. And what I tell clients is, while we can't guarantee an approval with council, but we can guarantee we'll do everything in our ability to give you the best chance of an approval.
Yeah, nothing is guaranteed. It's a tangible asset. It's a real thing that we have to do and build. And then you're also dealing with people and opinions. So even I've got experiences with having everything correct, but then our interpretation or opinions are different to someone else's inside council. And then you have to take it to the next levels, but we won't go to that. We don't go into those difficulties in this podcast.
Yeah, sure.
I've got a couple more questions, Eli, and one of them is, tell us about a time where you've made a mistake in your life that has informed all the decisions going forward.
Yeah, good question. I don't think there's a particular mistake I made, but I was working at a particular council in Sydney, and often people would call us to say, "Hey, can we do this? Can we do that?" And on the phone or face to face, we'd obviously tell them, this is what we think you can do on the site, or we'd give them information on, maybe look at these resources to see if you can do what you want to do. But what I was taught early on by a colleague was always put things in writing, because particularly from a council perspective, if I say, yes, you can do this, no problem, you go to the next person in council, they'll say, well, no way, you can't do that. Or you lodge your application a year later and say, yeah, but Ellie told me so and so I could do this. So I learned very early on, and I apply that practice in my firm also, that if we're giving formal advice or even informal advice to clients or potential clients, it's best just to put it in an email. Number one, I guess, so there's a bit of a trail there. So it's not like his word versus my word. Maybe it's hearsay, but really it's in writing. So this is what we think you should do, or what you can't do on the property. Number one, and number two, it also gives them the opportunity to digest the information, because town planning and councils, it's a very complicated area. It's not black or white most of the time. So it's where you've got to put things in writing, and so there's an email trail that sometime down the line, if it blows up and they say, well, Ellie, you told us this, but I'll say, well, actually, I sent you this email on whatever date it was. And that's what I told you already. So yeah, it's a lesson for life, and yeah, I still stick to it till this day.
I love that. It's a really good piece of advice when you're in investments, particularly. Document everything. If something's been said, and follow up that with an email with noting what you've said, your understanding of what has been said, and just make sure that it's very clear. In writing, it's black and white. When you leave it as a conversation, there's plenty of gray, and that's where all the conflict arises. So really good feedback there. Now, I've got one last question, and that is, what advice would you give new investors and or homeowners so they don't fuck up their next purchase or application?
Well, I would say speak to a town planner early on in the process. So whether you're looking to buy a property or you have a property already, you want to know what to do with it, speak to your town planner to understand exactly what you can and can't do with the property. Now, I'm not saying this because I want more work, I'm busy enough. But at the same time, if you talk to somebody else, they might say, well, my friend said I could do this, or my architect's friend said I could do this. You need to talk to someone with the expertise and knowledge of town planning, particularly in terms of what you can and can't do on your property, as well as you need the advice up front. You can't be in a situation where, I'm doing a home renovation, I'm doing a dual occupancy, building a block of apartments, whatever scale of project it is, and you get it beautifully designed by your architect who you're paying truckloads of money for, and you say, okay, let's send it to the town planner now. That's already too late. The town planner has to be involved up front in the process to work with you, your designer, your architect, to make sure that the design complies as much as possible. Now, I must disclose every project. It's not possible for every project to comply for various reasons. But up front, I would say, Dominic, call your town planner to get some advice early on in the process.
Another good piece of advice, engage your consultants early in the piece to discuss what your plans are, what your intent is, and bring those people to the table as soon as you can. I've noticed that having a builder, architect, and town planner, if they're working in their own lanes, you're going to end up with 4 or 5 different products. So your job as the client, developer, investor is to mediate these different consultants, bring them together to your vision, but then use your expertise to refine or take out a lot of the risk and to actualize your vision. So really good advice. Thank you very much, Eli. I really appreciate that. To all of you out there, thank you for tuning into the podcast. Happy investing, happy house hunting, and happy developing. I'll catch you all later.